Many of us have had videos talking about the max damage you can do in D&D pop up on our recommendeds or in our For You pages, but most of those videos only talk about level 20. This makes sense. It is the peak of power that players can reach, but there's a lot of uncharted water left in the other 19 levels. In this video, I'm going to be exploring the combinations I came up with to get the most damage within the first 5 levels of D&D. Let's establish our rules. For our general rules, we're only going to be using content from the 2024 source books. Damage only will count during one round, but prep turns are allowed, and we can use a reaction so long as it occurs before the start of our next turn. We're only going to be counting damage against one target, so no AoE spells like Fireball or Hunger of Hadar. We're going to have 2 different damage categories. The first is average damage, which is meant to represent a decently likely scenario for the max damage. For average damage, we're only going to assume that our attacks hit and that they do the average damage. We're going to assume the target fails its saving throws, and we're going to assume that the target tries to hit us, because most monsters in D&D try to. Perfect damage is for the absolute best case scenario. We assume that our attacks always crit and get the highest possible damage roll. We assume that the target fails all saving throws, and we can assume any properties about the target or make them do anything on their turn that is necessary for us getting more damage. For instance, we can make them an undead for Paladin Smite, or we can have them trigger an opportunity attack for us. I'm going to be going over the average cases first, then I'll explain the perfect builds and how they differ. At levels 1 and 2, we don't have many resources. Subclasses, species features, and higher level spells don't really come online until level 3, so we're mostly fighting for scraps down here. Our class will be Paladin for Divine Favor and Divine Smite. Divine Smite is available at level 1 if it's prepared, but it also costs a bonus action. To remedy this, our Paladin will be dual wielding 2 scimitars. Since Divine Smite's taking up our bonus action now, we'll need the scimitar for the Nick Weapon Mastery property so we can use our offhand attack as part of our action. We'll also be taking the Savage Attacker Origin feat. Putting all of this together gives us a damage roll of 1d6 plus 3 from our main attack, 1d6 from our offhand, 2d8 from Divine Smite, and 2d4 from Divine Favor. If we use Savage Attacker optimally by rerolling the first attack if the roll is 3 or less and always rerolling the second attack if possible, we get an average damage of 25.34. Paladin level 2 isn't really going to do much, so we're going to multi-class into Warlock for 2 different reasons. The first is Hellish Rebuke. My rules say for this we can assume the enemy tries to hit us on its turn, so Hellish Rebuke is allowed. The second reason we need Warlock is for Pact of the Chain. If we summon a Pseudo-Dragon, it can hit them for some poison damage and can cause them to fall unconscious. The poison damage does not count, but we can use the unconscious condition to guarantee a crit and use that crit in our damage calculation. Because it is only on the first hit, we will use a greatsword and only attack once instead of the offhand attack from a scimitar. Because we now crit, our damage roll is 4d6 plus 3 from the greatsword, 4d8 from Divine Smite, 2d4 from Divine Favor, and 2d10 from Hellish Rebuke, for an average damage of 52.93 with Savage Attacker included. At level 3, we're going to be changing our approach significantly. Full Sorcerer. Subclass doesn't matter, but we need to be a Goliath. We start off by using Hold Person during a prep turn. If we are within 5 feet of our paralyzed target, we automatically crit even though we're not using melee attacks. We then use a Twin Spell Scorching Ray, which, admittedly, there is a bit of muddy water on if Twin Spell works, because the wording is not exactly the same, but my interpretation is that it works. After that, we follow up with a Quickened Firebolt with Goliath Fire's Burn for a damage roll of 16d6 from Scorching Ray, 2d10 from Firebolt, and 2d10 from Fire's Burn, for an average damage of 78. 4th level is the same setup, but we're revisiting Warlock for Hellish Rebuke. Our damage roll here is basically the same. 16d6 from Scorching Ray, 2d10 from Firebolt, 2d10 from Fire's Burn, and 2d10 from Hellish Rebuke, for an average of 89 damage. 5th level uses the same build for both average and perfect damage, so I'm going to hold off on revealing it for now and revisit levels 1 through 4 for perfect and go over level 5 together. Starting back at level 1, we're picking Paladin, but we're going with Magic Initiate Druid for Shillelagh and a club to replace the scimitar on our main hand. With Shillelagh, we upgrade our club to a d8 damage die. Using this in combination with our Smites and Divine Favor, we get a similar roll to before of 2d8 plus 3 from our main hand club attack, 2d6 from our offhand scimitar, 2d8 plus 3 from an opportunity attack, 68 from a Smite crit, and 64 from all of our Divine Favor, which maximizes to a total of 122 damage. As you can see, the perfect damage and average damage are drastically different. So if you're going to go through the trouble of trying to recreate this in a game, expect to get something more similar to the average damage numbers, as the perfect damage numbers are just a fun way to see the absolute limit of the system and are not really practical for you to try to hit. Level 2 shows the first major difference between the two hemispheres. We're going to pick up a level and ranger for Hunter's Mark because we are not currently concentrating on anything, so we just want the extra 1d6 damage on all of our attacks. Because we always crit, this is 2d6 per attack, which is 6d6 total, for a maximized damage of plus 36, bringing our total to 158. Level 3 is where we switch up to our final build strategy for max damage. We take 3 levels in Druid, subclass doesn't matter, but we need the Crafter Origin feat. At the end of the long rest before this fight, we craft a set of caltrops. Then, over the course of a few turns, we cast Longstrider on ourselves, cast Spike Growth, set up our caltrops, grapple our target, and then wild shape into a horse. I don't know if a horse can grapple someone, but what I do know is there's nothing in the wild shape rules that specify that it ends the grappled condition on a creature if you use it. Once we're in wild shape, we're going to be using our damaging turn, in which we're going to be dragging our target back and forth along the edge of our Spike Growth, which deals 2d4 damage every 5 feet we move them. Using our action to dash gives us a total movement speed of 140 feet. A tiny target does not have an additional movement cost while grappling, so dragging back and forth across our Spike Growth and onto the caltrops, we get a damage roll of 56d4 plus 1 for a total of 225 damage. At level 4, we upgrade this same setup by taking the Speedy feat for 20 more feet of movement and 84 more damage, bringing us to 257 total damage. At level 5, we're going to be taking 3 levels of Druid and 2 levels of Monk. Monk gives us unarmored movement, which is the same thing as the Speedy feat, and also allows us to more importantly use Step of the Wind to dash as a bonus action. Using this combination, we get a final movement of 240 feet for this turn, which turns into a final damage roll of 96d4 plus 1 for a total of 385 damage. Average damage uses the exact same setup, but with the difference being that we cannot assume our target is tiny. This halves our movement speed, so we can only drag them 120 feet for a damage roll of 48d4 plus 1, or a final average damage of 121. And that's it. This was a pretty fun experiment. I'm looking forward to levels 6 through 10 to see if anything can dethrone our Horse Lord, and I think it might happen because I'm running a little short on movement speed increases soon, and that's really what that build hinges on. Regardless of what happens, or if you're sticking around for the next one, thank you, and have a good one.